On 5 News, can Theresa May uninvite Donald Trump?
Donald Trump has got to go!
Protesters, MPs and now even the Home Secretary criticised the new president's anti-Muslim ban. A former Foreign Office boss says Mrs May was far too quick to offer him Britain's highest diplomatic honour, a full state visit. So can Downing Street wriggle out of what's fast becoming a very difficult situation? Also, heated arguments in the Commons over how Brexit gets triggered as ordinary voters tell them to get a move on.
Get it done. Get it done, let's get it out and let's start off fresh.
I don't think we can reverse it. It would be great if we could, but I don't think we can.
So since we can't,
get on with it.
The legacy of war hero Alan Turing that's meant thousands of criminalised gay men being pardoned. And the disabled daughter of a famous footballer who's making a name for herself in her own way. Hello, welcome to 5 News. I'm Matt Barbett. It's already going to be one of the most controversial visits to Britain in modern times, and now it's been confirmed that MPs will debate whether Donald Trump should get the full pomp and pageantry. They'll argue over 2 rival petitions about the state visit, and the one that's calling for the trip to be downgraded has been signed by nearly 1.7 million people. Even the Queen is being dragged further into the row as well. As Julian Drucker reports now, it follows a night of protests across the country.
In our biggest cities, in their thousands, the protests against a president. A reaction to his travel ban on 7 mainly Muslim countries. But it's Donald Trump's own travel plans stoking controversy, and Theresa May's decision to grant him a state visit. That has put the Queen in a difficult position, says the former head of the Foreign Office.
I understand, as I say, the importance of cementing the relationship with the new president. I think there are other ways of doing that than by proposing a state visit, which brings the Queen so closely into the issue, and that could have taken a bit more time.
Britain's most recent big state visit was from China's President Xi. Theresa May, then Home Secretary, participated. But Lord Ricketts urges downgrading Mr Trump's invitation to remove the grandeur laid on for previous presidents. May 2011, and the red carpet was rolled out for Barack Obama. But he only received the invite after 758 days as Commander-in-Chief. His predecessor was afforded the accolade in November 2003, but George W. Bush's invite was even slower in coming, 978 days after he became America's leader. So the speed with which Mr Trump has received his is highly unusual. The offer of pomp and pageantry made after just 7 days as president. Given the protests that met Mr Bush, protecting Mr Trump will also provide a huge logistical headache.
Donald Trump will want to go to the pomp and circumstance of everything that goes with that, but I think the chances of them walking around the streets of London is almost zero. And of course we also have to bear in mind that the US bring their own security with them, so an enormous security presence that will come from the United States of America along with the president.
Mr Trump vowed to be the jobs president, but he's already made this woman unemployed. He fired Sally Yates, the government's top lawyer, for not defending the immigration order. The White House said the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, has betrayed the Department of Justice by refusing to enforce a legal order designed to protect the citizens of the United States. As Mr Trump gets on with his new job, MPs will now debate the sort of welcome he'll eventually receive here.
Let's have a word with Julian now. And on top of all of this, Julian, some tough words from our own Home Secretary this evening as well.
Yes, Matt, those protests were, of course, prompted by Mr Trump's travel bans, the protests, the petitions and a chorus of disapproval this evening from a very senior figure. That is the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd.
We disagree with the ban and that we have said that it is divisive, it is wrong. I will continue to say that. I'm sure all MPs will reassure their constituents the sort of language the Prime Minister has used, that I will use. This will never be our policy. We have a completely different approach to refugees to these countries, and that will continue to be the case.
And she said that the travel ban could also provide a, quote, a propaganda opportunity to those from the so-called Islamic State terror group. That debate over whether the state visit should go ahead will be on February the 20th. That petition online has been signed by 1.7 million people. That debate will take in a second petition now, though. That is calling for the state visit to actually go ahead. That has now been signed by more than 130,000 people.
Julian, many thanks indeed. Well, another big thing on the Westminster to-do list. It is exactly 2 months until we reach Theresa May's deadline for triggering Article 50. Today, MPs began having their final say before that happens, and most in the Conservative and Labour parties already insist they're not planning to block it. But for many voters, it's still taking far too long. Our political editor, Andy Bell, has more.
Britain gets to work for another day, but 7 months after the referendum, is it time for Parliament to get to work on Brexit?
Get it done. Get it done, let's get it out and let's start afresh.
I don't think they're taking too long. It's a big decision. I think it needs to be considered.
I don't think we can reverse it. It would be great if we could, but I don't think we can.
So since we can't,
get on with it.
Today the government put a very simple bill before MPs, asking for the power to trigger Article 50 and start the process of leaving the EU.
At the core of this bill lies a very simple question. Do we trust the people or not?
One Conservative MP, though, will vote against his own government. Among his stony-faced colleagues, he ridiculed life after Brexit.
Apparently you follow the rabbit down the hole and you emerge in a wonderland where suddenly countries throughout the world are queuing up to give us trading advantages and access to their markets that previously we've never been able to achieve.
Now, even MPs who won't vote against this still have the chance to change the law by putting down what are called amendments. And so far, we have 85 pages of amendments, everything from guarantees for workers' rights to demands for more money for the NHS. Now, it's unlikely, frankly, any of them will get the votes to become law, but you can still see why Theresa May wanted to keep this whole process out of the hands of MPs. The Labour leadership have told their MPs they must not block this process, and most of them are resigned to going along with that.
I think given the referendum, we do know that a majority of people who voted want us to leave the European Union. And personally, I would find it very hard to set my face against triggering Article 50 for that reason as a Democrat.
She should get her Brexit bill through before her own deadline, maybe as early as March the 9th. Then the negotiations will finally begin to shape what Britain will look like outside the EU. Andy Bell, 5 News.
A mother has been cleared of encouraging her boyfriend to shoot a crying toddler in the head with an airgun. Emma Horseman was accused of telling Jordan Walters to fire the weapon to shut up 18-month-old Harry Studley in Bristol last July. She denied a charge of grievous bodily harm. Her boyfriend had already pleaded guilty. The Supreme Court is considering the case of a father who was fined for taking his daughter on holiday during school term time. Lawyers for John Platt claim the government's policy on unauthorised absence would criminalise parents on an unprecedented scale. Ministers say every day missed harms a child's development. A grandmother was killed in the Tunisian terror attack on the 10th anniversary of her husband's death, a court has been told. Lisa Burbidge was one of 38 people who were shot dead in the resort of Sousse in 2015. The sad coincidence has been revealed as inquests continue to hear evidence about each of the 30 British victims. Our chief correspondent Tessa Chapman reports.
She was full of love, a doting grandmother, a mum in a million. Today, Lisa Burbidge's daughters and other relatives travelled from Gateshead to hear evidence about the day she was killed in Tunisia. It was the 10th anniversary of her husband's death when the gunman attacked on the beach. A police animation played in court showed how Lisa had run into the Imperial Mahaba Hotel after fleeing the shots. She was found in an office near the indoor pool. Her holiday companions had lost her in the chaos. The three friends waited in Lisa's hotel room for 5 hours, desperately hoping she'd return, but she never did. Eventually they were taken to the hospital to see if her body was there. The court heard she had died from gunshot wounds to the head. The friends identified her by her nail varnish and her clothing. Rita Wilkinson lived through that hellish day too, but she lost her husband. She and their daughters wept in court as her statement was read out. Losing Bruce, she said, was like losing her best friend and right arm. Rita described how they were separated as they tried to escape the gunman. When the shots died down, she went to find her husband. A lady said, "I wouldn't go down there, there's a body. I had to check if it was Bruce. I saw a body covered with a sheet and I knew it was Bruce. I moved the sheet and recognised him." There is a heartbreaking story behind each of these victims' deaths. 30 British tourists with devastated families. Tessa Chapman, 5 News, at the Royal Courts of Justice.
Now, thousands of men who had criminal convictions for being gay or bisexual have been given a posthumous pardon. It's part of a law that's come into effect in the name of World War II codebreaker Alan Turing. Simon Weigar is with me now. So, Simon, what's happened today?
Well, the royal assent for the pardon has come today, Matt. This involves 50,000 men who were committed for crimes that are now non-crimes. They were consensual acts. And the Turing Bill, named after Alan Turing, as you say, the brilliant mathematician and wartime codebreaker who helped defeat the German Navy. After the war, he was convicted of gross indecency. And this case achieved great prominence, also part of the film The Imitation Game from 3 years ago.
The medication?
Well, the judge gave me a choice, either 2 years in prison or hormonal therapy.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Yes, that's right. It's chemical castration to cure me of my homosexual predilections.
Well, shortly after that, Alan Turing took his own life. He was pardoned in 2013, and there's been this campaign for a pardon for all of these men. Men who are still living, they have to apply for the pardon. That's the slightly controversial part of this, but campaigners say after persecution and prosecution, now there is some humanity.
OK, Simon, many thanks indeed. Still to come on 5 News. The D-Day veterans being honoured by the country they helped to liberate. And making her breakthrough as a model, the 12-year-old who's proving the doubters wrong. Those stories coming up after the break. Welcome back. This is 5 News. Friends and colleagues of MP Jo Cox have taken on her cause to help tackle loneliness. And not long before she died, the Labour MP began setting up a special commission after meeting people in her constituency who'd become isolated. Peter Lane has also been meeting one of them and finding out how Jo's legacy will help.
It's not very nice. It's lonely. I just felt alone, that no one cares.
For 3 years, Sandra barely left the house and had little contact with the outside world as isolation took over.
What did it do to you? How did it change you?
Well, it made me really ill mentally and things like that, and didn't want to get up in the morning, want to cry all the time, crying all the time.
Sandra's local MP was Jo Cox. Jo came to see her to hear her experience of loneliness as she took her first steps towards setting up the commission.
She was really listening and really interested, and I think she was really upset actually, and I just asked her if she could sort of do anything, to help these people.
Today, Jo's husband and sister joined MPs and charities to launch her commission to find new ways to tackle loneliness, dubbing the problem Britain's silent epidemic.
Loneliness transcends age, gender, race, religion, class and party politics. It's something we can all tackle together as a society to create cohesive communities and positive relationships, and of course to make Jo proud. Thank you very much.
Jo Cox was elected in May 2015.
I'm elated, but I'm humbled that the people of Batley and Spen have put their trust in me to be your next Member of Parliament.
Just over a year later, she was murdered, but her political legacy lives on.
So many people do want to do something in their life to honour Jo's memory, to live their lives a little bit more like Jo Cox lived hers.
There you are, Abdul.
That's a list?
Yes.
Okay.
Life for Sandra is now very different, with weekly visits from the Royal Voluntary Service for simple things like help with the shopping. Priceless in itself, because those regular visits mean regular company. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Next, at 12 years old, Isabella Neville is defying all sorts of expectations. The daughter of former England and Man United star Philip Neville, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 18 months old, and doctors said she'd probably never walk. Now, though, she's proving them spectacularly wrong, as Minnie Stevenson reports.
Isabella Neville is about to turn 13, but today she is celebrating another big milestone because she's just been signed as a model, something she has always dreamed of. Isabella also has cerebral palsy, making her one of the first people in Britain with a disability to be taken on by a mainstream agency.
I was just really shocked at first, but then I told all my friends and I was so proud and so happy. I always wanted to do it, but I never thought I could do it. It's something I really dreamed of doing.
Isabella has, of course, some practice being in the spotlight. Her dad is former England player Phil Neville. Today, her mum, Julie, told me their daughter has always broken down boundaries. But when she was first diagnosed, doctors told them she would probably never walk.
It's quite bleak at the time. In fact, the day they diagnosed her, I went home and I cried myself to sleep on the stairs and woke up in the same position the next day. And that went on for quite a long time. It was just this continuous struggle where I felt like I was trying to keep my head above water, and that did go on for a long time. So to be where we are today, I would have given everything that we had.
Isabella also has a brain for business. The 12-year-old told me there's a gap in the market. She wants to model and design shoes for other children with cerebral palsy.
There's lots of people with disabilities that want to do something when they're older. So I want to tell them that they can do it and they can follow their dreams.
Julie says children with disabilities simply aren't represented.
You know, and the way I look at it with Isabella is she's equally as beautiful, equally as capable, but certainly not equally as employed or represented. And so I think if Isabella sets an example and other children believe that, or anybody with any kind of disability, that even though maybe they're not equally represented, that doesn't mean they shouldn't be, and it doesn't mean that they can't be going forward.
Isabella has grown up believing that her disability doesn't make her different, but does mean she's even more determined. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
That's a good picture. Finally, a group of D-Day veterans have been given a very special thank you by the country they helped to liberate. The 12 former servicemen, who are all now in their 90s, have been awarded the highest honour that France has to offer. And they've been telling Olivia Kinsley what it means to them.
It is a proud moment for these British veterans, side by side at the French ambassador's house, listening to the Marseillaise, and France's highest distinction, the Légion d'honneur, being pinned on their lapels. They all took part in the Normandy landings in June 1944. It was the beginning of the end of the war. Victor Cyborn was 23 and a volunteer with the Royal Marines. He remembers D-Day like it was yesterday.
Well, I remember as we approached the beaches, you could, the noise of the big naval guns were firing from out at sea, the waves of bombers going over. It was very noisy.
Albert Wiltshire was a wireman in the Royal Navy. He insists this medal isn't just for him.
This belonged to the ship. It's not me. I'm only one of 18 of us. That is a recognition of the part we played in doing and landing all those different groups in France.
Former gunner Ivan Solomons is Jewish. At 93, he worries about intolerance in Europe and abroad.
I feel it's a shame. I think people
are wasting the most beautiful gift that we have of being alive, and it's just a shame. And hopefully that the world will become more tolerant, more understanding.
The whole world seems to be upside down, what with Trump in the United States and us pulling out of the Union. And I wish I could live long enough to see it all settle down again.
These men fought for peace in the worst of wars. For that today, France honoured them. Olivia Kinsley, 5 News.
Very well deserved. That's it from me for now. I'll be back though at 6:30 with 5 News tonight, when we'll be debating whether Donald Trump's state visit to the UK should be downgraded. There's a big debate going on about this on our Facebook page, where lots of you are having your say. Join the discussion by going on Facebook and searching there for C5 News. We'll also be looking at Brexit through the eyes of Boris Johnson's dad, Stanley. Now, he's written a political thriller about the apparent skullduggery which might have taken place. Who could he be talking about? We'll be chatting to me here in the studio. That's in an hour's time, but that's all for now. Claire Nazir has the weather next, and I'll see you at 6:30 for 5 News tonight. Bye for now.